Welcome to this teaching unit entitled Emotional Processes and Technique for Emotional Regulation. The main objective of this teaching is to contribute to the fulfillment of the educational goal of the environmental project by providing the knowledge and the competencies related to emotion and emotional regulation, as well as the strategies that coaches can use in order to help athletes increase their emotional competencies for optimize their sport performance and well-being. So, the plan of this video is as follows. After an introduction about the definition of emotional concepts, emotion, mood, and affect, the cognitive motivational relationship theory of emotion and the process model of emotion regulation theory will be present in order to highlight emotional process. It is important to clearly define the theoretical contents of emotional constraint. At the world, three main emotional constraints can be identified: affect, emotion, and mood. Affect refers to analyze valence response that is pleasant versus unpleasant experience. Emotion is a response to a specific situation which induces a synchronization of the component of the emotional response, subjective perception, behavioral change, action tendencies, and physiological change. Through, an emotion is always related to an event or a situation. In contrast, mood is not related to a specific situation. We talk about free-floating experience without specific purpose. Most of the time, mood is an experience of longer duration than an emotion. Researchers try to understand how to explain the experience of emotion. In other words, for example, why I feel anxiety in this situation and why I feel anxiety rather than anger or dejection. Although several theoretical across the history propose to respond to this research question. The most acknowledged theory in sports psychology is the cognitive motivational relational theory of emotion. This theory has been specifically adapted to the sporting context by Lazarus, even if this theory is used in a wide range of other contexts such as health, work, or school. The cognitive motivational relational theory of emotion belongs to a discrete approach of emotion based on the rationale that this theory focuses on specific emotions such as anger, joy, and anxiety. This theory is a cognitive theory of emotion. This is an appraisal theory offering a two-step cognitive evaluation of the situation by the athlete, including primary and secondary appraisal. Primary appraisal is designed to identify the perceived importance of the situation or event in which the athlete is grown. The secondary appraisal is designed to evaluate the perceived resource of the individual to adapt to the situation. It is important to mention that primary and secondary appraisal could be extremely fast and inconscient processes. In other words, individuals always automatically scan the environment with their image. At the world, each of these discrete emotions experienced by athletes is tracked by a specific cognitive evaluation of the situation. So, cognition and emotion are strongly related. In order to illustrate the cognitive motivational relational theory of emotion, let me use an example often used within the literature. You walk down a dark street alone at night, and you hear a footstep behind you. This is a situation, the stimulus. You can appraise the situation in a manner that you think it's maybe an aggressor who just behind you. As a result of this cognitive evaluation of the situation, we will experience the emotion of fear, including physiological change. You begin to tremble or your heart beats faster. Besides the psychological processes explaining the tracking of emotion, it is also important to keep in mind that athletes also try to regulate their emotion. The process model of emotion regulation theory proposed by Krauss represents a fruitful theoretical framework explaining emotional regulation. Emotional regulation refers to the process by which individuals influence which emotions they have, when they have them, and how they experience and express their emotions. 5 types of emotional regulation dimension I propose in theoretical. Situation selection, situation change, attentional deployments, and cognitive change refer to emotional regulation focused on antecedents. Antecedent focused regulation manipulates the input that emotional process. In sports, attention deployments, turning attention toward or away from something, or cognitive change, reappraising the situation one-is-one on the capacity to manage the situation, are particularly used. Modulation of the emotional response refers to an emotional regulation focused on the response. Response-focused regulation manipulates the output to the emotional process and includes strategies that intensify, diminish, profound, or curtail ongoing emotional experience, behavioral or physical regulation. For example, relaxation technique or emotional suppression are often used in sport context. The two theories explained in the previous slide are learned understanding emotion concept from its antecedent to its consequences. In particular, the cognitive motivational relational theory of emotion, as well as the process model of emotion regulation theory, highlights that emotional process is comprised of 3 interconnected psychological constraints: emotion, appraisal, and emotion regulation. Emotion, in response to a situation or an event, refer to the synchronization of several components, including subjective experience, action readiness, emotion expression, facial expression, and physiological changes. Appraisal refers to the cognitive evaluation, tracking emotion, whereas emotion regulation is characterized by different types of emotion regulation, including antecedents-focused emotion regulation, response-focused emotion regulation. It is important that emotion regulation strategy can be more or less efficacious, justify the distinction between the natures and the efficacy of emotion and regulation. Lazarus talk about relational theory of emotion because emotion arises from a transaction between an individual and a situation. Individual is characterized by personal factors such as motivation or goals, value and belief, personality traits, and mental, physical, technological competencies within the sport context. The situation in which the individual as one is characterized by social, physical, and mental demand and resources. And it is the interaction between the individual and the situation with striking the experience of emotion through appraisal processes. Finally, emotion experienced by athletes impact a wide range of variables including athletes' behaviors, performance, cognition, decision-making, communication, and well-being. Thanks to listening these units.
Hello everyone and welcome to teaching unit number 6, emotional processes and techniques for emotional regulation. My name is Francine Atmer and today we're going to talk about planned disruption as a part of the what can I do in the practical field? What can I do in the applied, from the applied perspective? What are planned disruptions? I don't know if you've ever heard about it, but let's start with the idea behind it. The idea is that as an athlete or even as a coach, there are always stressful experiences that you have. And the idea of seeing those stressful experiences as something valuable that can actually improve, for example, athletes' performance or resilience, or for coaches provide an opportunity to learn something from it, for example, by anticipating future obstacles, is a great opportunity. And this is the idea behind those planned disruptions, that we actually have to deliberately and plan those activities during training and actually expose athletes to demanding and stressful situations. The idea basically came from the clinical perspective, and now, or not now, but has been implemented for many years in the sports psychology field. There are other terms that might be more familiar to you than planned disruptions. That could be pressure training, stress training, mental fortitude training, stress exposure training, all those kind of trainings where pressure and stress is deliberately implemented into the training process to expose athletes to this sort of idea. And planned disruptions are basically here used as an umbrella term, so that you know that when we talk about planned disruptions, we also talk about stress training and pressure training, for example. So those are the basics. And now the question is, how do we implement it? And there are several possibilities to do so. And this is actually an interview study with 6 high-performance coaches in the Netherlands and in Belgium. And they actually had an experience of around 19 years. They were from different sports like baseball or golf, track and field, fencing, field hockey. So there's a variety there, and they were interviewed about planned disruptions. And what we can see here is that there are several ways to implement it, and the idea is also, or there are at least examples given how they actually do it. So let's start with the first thing. It's location. So what they do is, for example, during training or during training camps, find an unpleasant location where your athletes can stay with poor facilities, so that they actually feel a little bit exhausted and they feel this physical strain that, for example, a long competition can bring. Also make them travel longer than potentially necessary, so they experience jet lag and they experience how to train under jet lag. There is this competition simulation. I think this is one of the most obvious ones, and also the most mentioned ones. So try to ensure and enforce competition between players. This is, for example, of course, when we talk about sports like baseball or track and field, when you have a team and not every player can compete. So force competition between them. Let players compete head to head, and also include competition conditions within training practice. Punishment and reward. This is also quite interesting. Physical punishments like push-up planks or running laps, or alternative punishments like clean up the gym or cook for other athletes. This could be also fun in a sense. And something like physical strain that we've seen in the location aspect already, but still really stress them on a physical level with demanding physical exercises and technical exercises using a maximum heart rate. Stronger competitions, so actually go and seek components that you know that are better, for example, than your team or your athlete. And during training, it is also nice to give the opponent, for example, an advantage, so that the other athlete learns how does it feel to start when someone else is leading, and how can I deal with the situation. And then very clearly, distractions, the auditorio distractions, and physical distractions. That depends, of course, on the sport, but it's always possible to play some noises in the background of crowds to make it more realistic, and also see how players react to those kind of noises and reactions from the crowd, and so they can learn also to deal with it. And fairness in general, so if you're a referee and there is a team competition during practice, of course, make wrong decisions, unfair decisions, so that athletes learn how to deal with them as well. Then, of course, restrictions in terms of communication restrictions, but also physical restrictions, so that they cannot use all their physical properties. So let's say the example given here is use earplugs. So it might be interesting to see how do they react when they have to play with earplugs, and how does it change their perception. And then other things, think outside the box. So expose them to other sports, or non-sport related events such as survival camp or cold weather outdoor activities. So one or the other of you might think, oh, well, they're not very nice. Of course, those things that they do are probably not considered very nice, because it's in the matter of things that they're supposed to impose stress on the athlete. However, I agree with you in a sense that we have to be very, very careful on how to implement them and if it's really worth it. So if you think about the first example of choosing poor facilities or make them travel longer so that they experience jet lag, I guess we all understand the point why this is interesting and why this could be important. On the other hand, this could also lead to less sleep, poorer sleep, and then to injuries again. So there is a balance that we have to keep. Also with respect to punishment, we know from other literature that people do not respond to punishment sometimes in a way that we prefer. So this might not be considered as useful at the end as one might think. And also unfair treatment could be considered problematic. And this has been also found in the literature already, that there is a possibility of damaging the relationships between the athlete and the coach. So this is something that coaches need to be aware of and need to be extremely careful with when implementing those planned disruptions. Unfortunately, we need more literature on it, what actually works and what can we do without feeling terribly or without not respecting boundaries or the health of the athlete in general. The idea behind using those planned disruptions, however, are understandable, and it's pretty much what I said in the beginning already. It's a familiarization, so it's the idea of, okay, you've been exposed to this kind of stress before during training, so when you compete, you know that you can handle this. It's creating awareness. So if you talk to your athlete afterwards, after you treated them unfairly during a training competition, and you talk to them and discuss their behavior, this is also something important. In the same sense, it helps them if they are more exposed to this thing, to those stressful situations during practice, that they actually develop and think about personal resources and techniques that they can develop. And it can also help to promote team processes. However, here again, we need to be careful when we have players within one team compete head to head. This might also be a bit dangerous. So how much empirical evidence is there? There is, of course, empirical evidence, and what we can say is that it can help. For example, here we had in basketball 5 weeks of pressure training that increased free throw rate. We have we've heard subjectively from sports psychologists and from athletes that it can help enhance performance, develop those coping skills, actually improve perceived stress management skills, and also help the athletes to learn to view pressure as a condition that they actually could accept and cope with. And it's not just there and it's happening, but you can actually do something about it. And what I find also interesting is that you put, as an athlete, more effort into training when you actually feel this kind of pressure. So this can also help increase training quality. All right, so finally, here is the example of the planned disruption in basketball, if you want to have a closer look and see what has been done there. And there is also quite an interesting video on planned disruption and stressful situations that you can check out online. And with that, I say thank you very much for your attention.